Welcome to the Beat Pain Podcast, where we learn what actually works for pain relief, staying healthy, and navigating the medical world. I'm your host, Brandon Cope. In this episode, we discuss the difference between movement and exercise, when exercise is bad, the truth about getting old, and the mindset of movement. Please enjoy my conversation with Chris Ecklund. Hey, Chris, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. It's really a pleasure to speak to you. We've always had great conversations in the past, and I love that we just have the chance to finally record our conversations and have so much fun together on this podcast today. You teach kinesiology at Westmont College. You co-own Prevail Performance here in Santa Barbara. Your wife does occupational therapy. The two of you are an exercise and health powerhouse team. You guys are awesome. Why are you so into exercise? Why is it so important to you personally?
Brandon, thanks for having me on. It's good to chat with you. And I agree. I always enjoy our conversations. So I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you on here. What did you call us? An exercise power team?
A powerhouse team.
Powerhouse.
It's got to be a house because you guys have a child now. So
yeah, appreciate that. Well, I don't know if I would go so far as to say that, but why I like exercise. I would say, quick story for you to give you some perspective on this. I had no idea that I really liked exercise or training or any of that. But when I was growing up or even into college, really, but I realized at some point that that movement kind of interested me. And I can actually remember being in high school, and how old are you? 20-something?
We're not going to speak about that.
We're not going to speak about that.
That's secret.
I feel like you're too young to remember these things that were called.
I probably am.
VCRs and VHS tapes.
No, I had VCRs.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah,
okay.
No, I had that. Yeah.
Well, back when I was in high school, before YouTube and all that stuff existed, I used to rent VHS tapes of Michael Jordan. There was one that was out called "Come Fly With Me." And it was a highlight reel. They just, you couldn't find that stuff, online. There was no online, but I used to rent these VHS tapes of Michael Jordan and bring them home and watch them on the VCR of him, this whole highlight reel. And I realized over years and looking back that I was fascinated by movement, and especially movement of really good, explosive, powerful, athletic people. It fascinated me. And in the process of that, also kind of unpack the fact that I really liked helping other people. I can even think back to high school and my friends on the basketball team and all the stuff, like growing up playing sports. I could see sometimes, like, if they were trying to jump higher, jump better. I remember thinking, gosh, they just don't really know how to move well. I could probably show them how to move better, even though I probably had no clue at the time. But, fast forward into college and having anatomy was probably the first class I ever really fell in love with. I started to begin to unpack that, and, eventually, hindsight, 25 years later, realized that movement fascinated me, and I really enjoyed helping other people do that well. And so, over the course of 25 years after school, have really grown to love that process of being able to help people and continue to learn in my own depth of what good movement is. That's kind of where it came from.
Yeah. It's interesting how you say that you saw other people doing movement and you could kind of tell, I think I could do that better, or I know how to do that better. And I think that a lot of people are very athletic and they can look at what other people do and they know in their own body, like they have that sense, okay, I could go and run faster than them, jump higher, I could kick the ball harder, throw it harder, whatever. But to be able to say, I know how to do that better than them, but then actually show them and teach them how to do it better, that's a whole different skill set, right? Yeah. And you've got that skill set. You do that with people every day,
Right.
Yeah. So that's a whole, analysis and then comprehension that you have to be able to show other people. And I think that can get really lost in the athletic world. There's a lot of, and that's the whole reason why when you see athletes play, it's like, okay, watch me do this. Okay, now you do the same. Because it's like, I
Mhm.
don't know how to articulate, do this thing, it's
Right,
just do
right,
what I did, whatever it is,
right,
it should be easy. It should be second nature,
right.
and movement, it's nice when movement is second nature, but for people who don't have that, I know
Yeah,
how to run and jump and do all of this stuff. It's just like a sixth sense that I have,
right,
just this ability to do that. They
right.
need somebody to come along and explain it in really black and white terms, and to kind of handhold and show them exactly how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, agreed. And I think as I got into the industry and I, being a young person out of school, I think, my assumption very wrongly at the time was, I can do this. Other people can do it too. Like I do it. They probably learn like I do, right? And having had the education I had in pedagogy and learning styles, I should have known better that not everyone is a kinesthetic learner. Not everybody has that. So as we got into the field and really got some perspective on the fact that, hey, it's not just sets and reps or lift more or move faster. There's the whole learning process that's involved in this, and everybody learns differently, and people can do it. They can do it, as long as the information is given to them in a way that they can receive it well, and in a way that's progressive, right? That's not too quickly, so that they can get the pieces and kind of piecemeal that thing together a part at a time. Um, but eventually, ultimately be able to do things that they never thought possible. It's just that they may have to chunk it and do a little bit at a time, whereas, amazing athletes can just grasp unbelievable, movement concepts and are motor geniuses all at once. So obviously different, but everybody has that capability. And I think that was something that, though it was quite surprising and eye-opening to me earlier in my career, I think once I started to unpack that a little bit and get a better perspective of that, it was very helpful for me in working with a wide range of people. And I think it's, allowed me and allowed us to be able to help so many more people as we got a better perspective on that.
Yeah. And you're using some terms that I want to talk about here. You're saying movement, and what's the difference between a movement and an exercise? I mean, are those the same thing? Are
Mm.
those different things? How do you view those two words?
Yeah, definitely different terms and different concepts. I went to a workshop. Gosh, was it 2 years ago already? Maybe it was last year, but it was with Wolf. I'll think of his first name later. Um, Adam Wolf. That's what it is.
That's a
Very
great
sharp
name.
guy, PT guy. Do you know Adam?
No, but it's a great
That's
name,
a good
Adam
name.
Wolf. That's a good, gosh, that's a cool
Yeah,
name.
so he's actually related to Chuck Wolf. I don't know if you know Chuck Wolf, but
Nope.
he's related to, in the Gary Gray house of,
Okay, sure.
yeah, of functional movement and therapy and all of that. Anyway, one of the things that he mentioned in his workshop was that there's a strong reaction to many of his patients, right? So he's in the PT world. Strong reaction to a lot of his patients or clients to the exercise word. So much
Mm,
so that he doesn't use that anymore. Doesn't give them their home exercise program or home, exercise homework. He will only use the word movement program. These are the movements I want you to do at home, or the patterns I want you to do at home. But I think research I've seen bears that out, that for whatever reason, if it's because of the way that um, we've we've created a stigma around the word exercise or whatever it is,
mm,
there's a pretty big chunk of people that hate exercise. Literally,
yeah.
I've seen numbers like 20, 25, 30% of the US population hates it. Doesn't just
Mm,
dislike it, but hates it.
wow.
So the utilization of different words, and this goes into even the training world as well, right? The movement pictures, the word pictures that you create for people, how you explain things. It drastically impacts the way that we think about things. It impacts the way that we move. So they are different terms, and movement doesn't have to mean exercise. Exercise, unfortunately, probably doesn't always mean movement or maybe good
Hmm.
movement, but definitely different words.
Yeah, it is interesting how people, you know, the thought process behind using the word exercise, or the other word I was thinking of is workout. If
Hmm.
people think, oh, I'm going to go do a workout, it's like, are you going to go throw up afterwards? Like, are you going to be able to
Right.
move after you do your workout? You
Right.
know, this weekend, I'm going to go run a half marathon, and I'm
Oh,
expecting
that's
that, okay,
awesome.
I'm running 13 miles on this weekend. I'm probably going to want to be, you know, pretty immobile. I'm probably going to be relaxing, not going out and doing any additional exercise after that. But sometimes people have this perspective that, oh, well, if I do, you know, this word exercise or workout, I'm like working until I'm dead. Like I just can't even move anymore.
Yeah.
And movement could be something different than that. You know, movement could
Yeah.
be defined differently than exercise or workout. So if people can, and also just that positive idea with movement is really helpful, because people don't really want to create habits around something that doesn't feel good or something that doesn't sound
Yeah.
good. You know,
Yeah.
people don't
Yeah.
like the idea of, oh, I'm gonna, you know what, I'm in the habit of waking up really early in the morning when it's cold and I'm tired and I'm already suffering
Yeah.
and I haven't had my coffee, and then I'm gonna go hurt my body with a ton of exercise that's gonna
Right.
make me feel, you know, super tired
Yeah.
and weak the rest of the day. It's like that sounds like a terrible habit, you know. But if
Yeah.
it's like, well, I'm gonna go move, and that movement is actually going to make my body feel better, that's actually kind of a healing, that's a healthy process for me to do that movement. That's great. What a
Yeah.
great habit. Yeah, we want to
Yeah.
do things that make us feel good, so let's do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is interesting, the differences of words like that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about how, you know, people can have the wrong ideas about what exercise means. You know,
Right.
how often do you see in all of your exercise that people do exercise in a way that's harmful? You know, you've worked with tons of people in exercise.
Hmm.
You've been working on exercise for a long time, or I should say movement. Movement is great. People should be moving,
Right.
but it can be done wrong. You know, when is it
Yeah.
harmful instead of helpful?
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big question. um, I think I should say I hope that my perspective at this point in my career is a bit better than it was 10 or even 5 years ago. But it's difficult to clarify exactly where that line is. I think, I'm sure with your experience, you've seen with different people, that line is much further back for this individual who's got all of these issues or limitations going on or past injuries. And that line is perhaps much further out for another individual who doesn't have limitations or history of injuries. Um, but I think something that to give some context to the answer that I did personally, and I think that we've been working on in our business over the past several years poorly previously, was giving people this idea or concept that if you do it this way, it's going to hurt. If you do it this way, you're going to have knee pain, right? If you squat this way, your knees are going to hurt, or your back's going to hurt. um, and kind of feeding forward or providing that self-fulfilling prophecy of,
Mm,
yeah, I mean, if we keep telling them they're going to be in pain, they hear pain enough, they're going to be in pain, right? And that's a whole another area of conversation. But we were a bit too pushy in our language, and probably even in the way that we were thinking about where the line is on good versus poor movement. And I think that we're doing a better job now at being cautious with our language there, because the reality is we're not 100% sure where that line is with some people, right?
yeah.
I mean, you have Joe who smoked from 13 years old until he was 113, and you know lived a great life and
Right.
whatever. And then this person gets lung cancer, never smoked a day in their life. There's a lot of circumstances that can contribute to um, movement becoming a bad thing for somebody. So us just saying, hey, this exercise is, you're not doing it right, or it's going to cause pain, is overstepping our bounds a bit. However, um, I think that I think that we should still be encouraging people to move well within a framework. I think there's good research to say if somebody moves like this, their chances for pain or injury, the likelihood goes up. So knowing that there's some pretty decent research on that, we're not going to do that. Right? We're going to avoid that as much as we can.
Right.
And we're going to head down this path of movement unless we do need and know that we need to make a change based on anatomical differences in this person, right? And we're going to find those as we go, but we're going to start with this framework. We're going to start with the biomechanics and the movement quality that we know. We're going to start with the pain prevention and injury research that we know, and we're going to move this way. So with all of that said, I think what we really come back to in discriminating between poor or good movement patterns comes back to, we're starting with a framework of what we know that's well researched. We have an individual in front of us that comes with genetics and limitations and past injuries that we've got to be cautious of, and then we're going to head down the road toward their goals, and we're going to make adjustments as we go based on how they come in every day, how they tell us things feel or don't feel. And then we're going to make adjustments from there. But, from our perspective, everybody's doing all the movements we can possibly do. We're in our language, we're pushing, we're pulling, we're squatting, we're hinging. We're going to do all of that stuff. But, my 90-year-old guy may not be doing a barbell bench press.
Right.
Who cares? But we're going to be pushing. We're just going to be pushing in a different way. So the exercise selection, the particular pattern that we might do, the movement pattern that we might do is going to change based on all of those things that we look at. So long-winded answer, but we're trying to be more cautious of saying, yeah, don't do that exercise. That's a bad exercise. That's going to lead to injury. Movement's good. We want people moving, but we're going to try and steer them hopefully a little bit better.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Lots of things to unpack here. First of all, did we trap ourselves into saying movement as positive and exercise is bad? Don't be afraid to say exercise. It's not bad. People just think it's bad. All right, people. All right. Oh man, we put ourselves in a trap there. You said something earlier that was really true. The self-fulfilling prophecy. When people have it in their head, if I do this movement, I will hurt myself.
Right.
And then it's like you do that one time and you're like, oh no, I'm going to totally blow out my knee because I squatted with my knee slightly inside that one time, and people freak out about that. And sometimes I wonder if for myself, if I'm almost more prone to injury because I sit around studying muscle pathologies all the time, is there that like negative, that nocebo, right? That effect in my brain where I'm like becoming more injured because I'm studying injuries more.
Right.
Like if I just didn't know anything, my body would be great. It's really interesting how you can play around with that. And especially in our positions, being therapists, trainers, and working with people in their movement. And if we see somebody do something, we want to caution them. We want to let them know, hey, we did our research and we know that that kind of movement is a higher risk of injury for you if you do that. So maybe avoid it or change it or something. But have we now created this weird, prophecy? And like you were saying back when you and Peter were starting the gym and working with people, it's like you guys maybe use certain language or certain tones or the way you would express correction for movement might have created almost a fear in somebody and maybe started that self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, that can happen with people. It's really interesting. The other thing that I'm thinking about with what you're saying is when you are exercising and you're working with people, you got to know your research, but you've got to know the person. Like you were saying, the person who's 90 coming in, if you don't have a relationship with that person and understanding what's going on in their body, then you're not going to be able to, all of your research, all of your other research stuff changes based off of what that person's capable of doing. I mean, I've had people who came in who were late 70s, but super strong. And I see this guy, I still see this one guy at the gym all the time. He's in like his late 70s and he's just like doing chin-ups like the rest of everybody else, and holding his planks and his push-ups and everything. And it's like, wow, that guy's totally got it at 70, so I could have put him in that bracket of like, well, you know what? you're at this age, so we really shouldn't be doing that right now.
Right.
And maybe that would be wise for certain people, but this particular person, being able to understand the person and what they
Yeah.
needed, I could look at them and go, actually, that person's totally capable of doing chin-ups, even
Hmm.
though they're way older than you think they should be doing chin-ups. But this guy's got it.
Yeah.
He's taking good care of himself and he can do that.
Yeah.
So it is really interesting, the difference of what people are capable of doing.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, like that goes back to our assessment, our conversation with people, right? Like, what do you do? What do you aspire to do? What is your activity look like right now? Having those conversations in the initial sessions and going through the assessment allows us the opportunity to really look at that individual as an individual and not lump
Hmm.
them with everybody else. And I've had this conversation with some of my clients recently, because I've got a handful of clients right now that are 60 to coming up on 80.
Wow.
And there's a couple clients who that are in that age bracket that think, well, maybe I shouldn't, or are nervous about this, or I'm probably getting weaker, and are putting themselves in that box. And it drives me nuts, because that's what they're hearing, right? That's what they have heard. That's the information and the junk that they've been fed their whole lives. Like, when you get older, you fall apart.
Yeah.
You're a mess. You're weak. That's just what happens. And I think, personally, that's extremely frustrating. It drives me nuts. And I think, one of the reasons why I'm in the industry, why I tell people I'm in the industry, is because I want people to hear truth. I want people to hear, the other stuff that they're not getting in the media, or these other
Absolutely.
outlets that are feeding them myths, or gosh, lies that are really discouraging, when in fact, so many people fall apart not because they're 40 or 50 or 60 or 70. It's because they stop moving and
Hmm.
they stop playing,
Hmm.
or they they completely trash their bodies and don't care for the gift that they've been given.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a separate issue, but they just stop moving and playing, and having fun with movement. And so, yeah, the wheels do come off, but it doesn't necessarily happen at 70. I mean, some of that stuff I see happening in teenagers or 20s or 30s. Well, it's not the age, it's some of these other things that really are massive contributors to that.
Yeah. Wow. People stop playing. That's depressing, to think that people
Yeah.
don't want to play anymore,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is such an interesting thing with movement and exercise, because there's so much play involved with that. There
Yeah.
is so much, and it doesn't have to be weightlifting, but like playing a sport, right? That can be
Right.
so fun. When you're kids, it's like play mostly is moving. And then when you get older, play is like crossword puzzles, which I still enjoy my crossword puzzles, but
Yeah.
can I do it on the treadmill or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
Can I play with my movement too?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Undo all those lies, please. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's something we joke about a fair amount whenever we have youth come into our facility, right? You get a, um 8 to 12-year-old. A matter of fact, even when some of like Peter's kids come in here, they're 3, 4 or 5 year olds coming in the door. They walk in here, they see a playground. That's what they see,
Totally.
and their eyes get big and light up, and they're running around throwing things and jumping. And then you have 20, 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old walk in the door, and they see a torture chamber.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happened here? Like, where did
Right.
we go wrong? And are we in the industry part to blame for that? I hope not, but yeah, the idea of play goes away, and that's not good. That's not good.
Yeah, yeah, we need a new mindset when it comes to exercise, making it from torture into play.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of my younger siblings who, if they would go into my backyard, they used to see that I had these rings up, and in my
Hmm.
old backyard, I had like gymnastic rings,
Yeah.
and I used to do a lot of arm workouts, and they would love to come over to my house just so that they could swing on the rings.
Sure. Yep.
Other people would be like, no, I don't want to touch those, that's
Right.
gonna hurt my shoulder,
Right.
something like that. And they were like,
Right.
no fear. Let's jump on it. Let's swing on it. I was the one who'd be like, okay, nobody land on their head here. Like,
Yeah,
let's be safe. But
exactly.
they're just playing all day long.
Right. Yep.
And, speaking to age too, and how people have this mentality of injury or threat as they get
Right.
older, I have the same thing as you were talking, people who will come into my office and they'll have some kind of pain, and I'll say, well,
Hmm.
that's funky, huh? Wait, I wonder what's going on there. And they'll say, well, I think it's just a little old age,
Right.
just a little bit of age creeping up on me. That's all it is. I'm just hurting because I'm getting old. And I'm like,
Hmm.
no, we don't have to just give up. Like, we don't have
Right.
to just say we're
Exactly.
getting old and that's just it. Like, let's
Right.
do something about it. Let's work on that. Let's try to
Yeah.
solve that problem. It's not just the fact that you're growing in age. It's probably the fact that you had a lot of wear and tear in this area. So how can we reduce wear and tear? How can we make it feel better?
Yeah.
That mindset is so huge. And we got to
Yeah.
change that, Chris. We got to change that mindset.
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah. With a lot of people who come in your gym that you're working with, you were talking about the assessment. You got
Hmm.
to get to know people in a relationship. You've got to do your assessment to understand what specific needs each person has. If
Hmm.
somebody comes into your gym and they've got no experience with exercise or movement, they're
Hmm.
really like, I just sit on the couch and I don't move my body like as little as possible. I mean, how
Right.
do you get started with them? How do you make sure that they're not hurting, themselves? How would you treat them differently maybe than somebody who is already an athlete?
Yeah. Well, when we initially speak with people about what we do and get a feel for where they're coming from, there are those individuals that come to us who either haven't been doing things for a long time or have never done anything, brand new to it, or are just severely deconditioned and they know it, and they're nervous about coming in. So when we have um, that understanding, that background, it does allow us to put them at ease before they come in, and then even when they do come in for their initial assessment with us, so that we can probably do a better job at framing the conversation and the words that we use about what we're going to do. But I think the biggest thing that we do when new people come in is allow them to know that, hey, the first time you come in, we're going to go through our assessment thing, and it's not going to be hard. It's not a workout. There's no strength. We're just going to move and see how
Hmm.
you move and see how you feel. So we put that right up front with with all of our clients, really, but especially those that are coming from a place of, I'll say, concern. I mean, potentially even fear of stepping inside a gym if they've never
Okay.
done it before. So it puts them at ease, because ultimately that's what our assessment entails, is movement. Um, and we know that if somebody has never done this stuff before, or has very limited exposure to doing strength training sorts of things, and matter of fact, even people who have had exposure and even significant exposure to strength training, if we've seen athletes or elite athletes who've walked in the door, many of them have no business lifting heavy weights, but don't realize that. So we don't do that stuff when people come in. We're
Okay,
gonna
wait. What makes you say, if somebody's an athlete, what makes you
Yeah.
say that they don't have any business lifting heavy weights? What brings you to that?
Some athletes don't. Some athletes
Okay.
don't. So kind of putting together the fact that just because someone's done strength training doesn't mean that they should be lifting heavy weights. If they've been
Mm,
doing it for 10, 20, 30 years, it doesn't necessarily mean that they actually have a good understanding of what they're doing. They may have just been doing it for a long time. So kind of the whole point in that was, we don't lift heavy weights. We don't do strength testing when people come in.
right.
So to put those that have never done the workout thing before, at ease. But to get back to your question, why would an elite athlete not be lifting heavy weights? Because some of them don't have a clue of what they're doing.
Wow.
And unfortunately, I would put that on us in the industry. They've been working with people who maybe haven't done a great job, or what we might consider a great job at really educating the athletes about what they're accomplishing and how to do that well, and helping them progress appropriately through movement patterns and progressions that would lead them to be able to potentially lift heavy weights well, if that was something that was going to benefit that athlete.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not uncommon. And this is one of the one of the main ways we get business. I hate to say it, but it's a truth for us, is when people or athletes get hurt working out at other gyms around town,
Mm-hmm.
or when they've tried it all and get stuck. That's when they would come to us. And it's not an uncommon conversation for us to have with an athlete to say, okay, you were doing these lifts. Why were you doing these lifts? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. What were you trying to accomplish with this lift? I don't know. Why do you do this lift that way? I don't know. So they just don't have a clue of what they're doing or why they're doing it, which can lead to some pretty significant, compensatory patterns that head down a path that really they shouldn't be heading down. So
Yeah, totally.
once again, long answer to the question of, why should an athlete not be lifting heavy weight? Well, first of all, if it's appropriate for them toward the end of their sport or objective, great. But if they don't know how or why, or don't currently possess the physical attributes or qualities to do that well, they haven't earned the right to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. People have to be educated enough about their own bodies, the exercise they're doing, why they're doing it. They have to be able to think critically about it. They
Yeah.
have to be able to interpret what's going on in their own body so that if they do it incorrectly, they can sense that and they can say, nope, I lifted that wrong. I know how to correct it. Or, you know what? I'm not in peak season right now. Like, I'm not competing for a sport. Why am I lifting like the max I possibly could be? Is this helpful for me, or is this going to hurt me? Like, why am I
Yeah.
doing this? Yeah.
Yeah.
People need to have enough knowledge to think critically like that. Totally.
Yeah.
And then, for people who come in, so, okay, people come in with zero experience.
Right.
They've got to have a good assessment. They probably don't want to jump straight into a strength assessment, because that's going to put a lot of weight on them. And we want to make sure that we're, going slow with those people. What about if somebody comes in with a pain issue? They come in, they've
Yeah.
got chronic issues, mobility, pain, something else. And you were even talking a little bit about kind of the fear of the gym, like
Yeah.
either people have anxiety about being in the gym, or if, sometimes people have fear of looking out of place, or they
Yeah.
are afraid of hurting themselves.
Yeah.
What can they do to be moving and exercising without any of those kinds of fears?
Depending on the individual, where they're coming from, our ideal is if all of our clients can see our physical therapist first,
Hmm.
um, regardless of whether or not they're in pain. I mean, from our perspective, which is a message that we've been trying to push for the last, 8, 9, 10 years, is that a good manual therapy assessment should be viewed as your regular physical, should be viewed as your regular dental checkup. Like,
Amen to that.
why
Yeah.
are we not looking at our musculoskeletal neural functioning once a year, at least, maybe twice a year, like we are with our teeth and our heart and our blood work? And why wouldn't we do that? So for everyone, we would ideally like to do that. But if somebody does come in the door with what we deem as significant pain or chronic pain that is limiting in life or movement, we're going to push them that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't have, physical therapists, manual therapists that they already see, then we're going to have ours look at them. If they do have that person outside, then our objective is to have the conversation with that therapist to find out what's going on so that we can get the best picture possible and know really where our limits are, what's available to us, and what really we do need to take off the table, or what we do need to completely steer clear of. So making sure that we can have the most information available about the person, and ideally are working with a medical professional and a good team so that we can care for that person the best that we possibly can, is step one for us. And then once we get them in the doors, it's all those other things that you mentioned. And it's getting to know that person. Well, is this a fear avoidance issue? Um, and actually they probably could do it, but they just don't know how, or at what speed, or at what load, or at what range they can currently move pain free, because
Yeah.
nobody's ever revealed these possibilities or options to them. Um, is that a limitation, or is it the fact that they don't they maybe just utilize, like you mentioned, that joint, um, because that's been their only option that they've known. Like, I'm coordinated from here, I can control from here, this is the only place I really know how to move from. But we've got so many other ways that we can move, and influence and teach them how to do daily life and be out of pain, that, hey, we just got to head down that road. So once we get to know that person, that's going to help us figure out where we can really go. But from what we've seen over the past 20 years, most people have a lot of opportunity to move, and explore and be healthy and train, and get healthier or perform better or whatever it is,
Yeah.
um, that they don't know that they can do, because they just haven't been educated to do it. So, I mean, those are some of the big ways that we start that process. And then, as a lot of it's graded exposure. People who've been in chronic pain, especially if they've had an injury or something where they really haven't, if they haven't had a good experience in rehab or therapy, or haven't had long enough because of their insurance, or been exposed to good professionals after they've gotten out of therapy, they may have lost some sensory input in those areas, and their brain just kind of fills that area with pain, which is unfortunately one of the things that our brain does. And if they haven't had just a slow, controlled, guided, educated, graded exposure back to good quality sensation and movement, um, they may not realize that that can happen, and they can get out of some of that chronic pain.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm hearing you. I'm agreeing with you 100%. When people want to get into a gym, they've got some kind of issue going on, they should absolutely be seeing some kind of therapist, a manual therapist, somebody who's going to be, touching the areas on their body, feeling it, understanding what's happening before they get into some really serious movement, because that's going to prevent so many future injuries for them. And that's going to help
Yeah,
them to take care of stuff. And that's great on you guys that you already recommend that for people.
yeah,
And I think one key thing that you were saying too is that you recommend it for people even if they don't necessarily think they have something wrong. And I think
absolutely.
that can be, people are thinking about their bodies incorrectly. They oftentimes think, well, I don't feel anything bad right now, so I won't feel anything bad after I'm doing intense exercise or movement for 3 months. Well,
Yes.
no, you're putting new stress on your body. Something that maybe wasn't really symptomatic before gets triggered, or gets stressed in a new way, and now these symptoms come up. Like, even if you're not feeling something, you should still be taking care of yourself to make sure that you're ready for all of that movement before you begin. You absolutely
Yeah.
should. And
Yep.
especially for people who are in that chronic pain situation,
Yeah.
like you're saying, if they get into a space where they think, oh, I'm always in pain, they can have a hard time understanding that what they're capable of.
Yeah.
They don't know that they can do things that they didn't think they were able to do before.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's our job. That's
Right.
like you and me. We are with those people who don't understand what their bodies are capable of. We are helping people and showing people what they are able to do. If we
Mhm.
work hard, you can get past some of this pain. You can do some of these movements. You can get out there and play these sports. You don't have to be in a wheelchair, way too young before your time. You can put away the cane. Like, we can get people into a whole different stage of life, and a lot of that is up to them, their expectations, their motivations, their mindset that they have.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And unfortunately, I think there's a fair amount of people out there that, for whatever reason, don't have available the resources and the education to know. I think, I was thinking, one of my buddies who's a PT, who would do some like medical um, trips. I think I can't remember what country he went to, but there was a guy that he was working with who had some what he deemed was significant back pain, and the whoever he spoke with at that time, whether it was a medical professional or not, I'm not sure, but said, like, this is horrible. You should basically, you've got to be careful. Otherwise, really bad things are going to happen, and bed rest and all of this thing. And, truth be told, it wasn't that at all. And I can't remember the exact situation, but my buddy, physical therapist, was able to say, hey, no, this is not really what's going on. Here's what's going on. You don't need to be as afraid or fearful of this pain as you are. Let me explain to you what your body's doing and how we can get out of here. And just understanding and knowing the process of where to go and why what was happening freed him up, and ultimately even took away some of that pain, right? Because there's
Wow.
not a fear of that pain anymore. So granted, there are individuals who are dealing with some real stuff, and are going to be dealing with it forever. But heaven forbid, those that could be moving out of that pain for a lack of education would be stuck there. So yes, our job to educate and help that process, because a lot of times there's options.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Lack of education, mindset. For people who are listening to us right now and they're thinking, yes and amen, I need that to happen in my body. I need those kinds of changes. And they're thinking what needs to happen in their mindset, their own beliefs, their limiting beliefs about their own body. What are the next steps for them? They've listened to us talking about this right now. What are the next steps for them to continue that education to make sure that they are moving correctly and that they're getting themselves into the proper mindset?
I think find a good medical and health, fitness, performance professional that can continue to walk with them down that path. Um, they got to find the people to connect with. So,
Yeah.
thankfully, right, there's more opportunities now than ever with internet, social media, how small the world's gotten in that regard. So there are some more options and availabilities toward those ends. The difficult thing, I think, is, from my perspective, is finding the good professional, and that's where, still at this point in my career, I don't know that I could say, hey, this is how this is how
Yeah.
to find a good manual therapist or physical therapist or a medical professional that's going to be able to speak good things into you, or a good fitness professional. There's certain things that you can look for, but even still, right, they have the right degrees or the right certifications. That still doesn't mean you're going to find that great professional. So I think probably one of the benefits of this day and age, and with things like this, right, podcasts or social media, is, if you find people that you trust, well, then you can find out who they trust and who they trust, and hopefully you can find somebody that's either going to be close to you that you can see, or accessible somehow that you can trust. But
Yeah.
man, at this point, still I struggle, other than to say I know who I trust and who I don't trust. But just to give a degree or a certification or something as a guideline is, I don't think we can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's personality, there's a relationship that comes along with finding a professional. There's so
Right.
many different details. People really have to go out there and experience different professionals and understand which one is going to help them with their mindset. But I think, and I mean, professionals, it could be friends, it could be people in your family. I mean, I think that when you're around another person with a attitude, with a mindset about how they live their life or do certain things, you will, just by proximity and time with that person, start to adapt some of those. That's going to rub
Hmm.
off on you. So
Yeah.
if people are with professionals, whatever the mindset is of that professional, whatever their belief system is about movement and exercise and health, you're
Hmm.
going to start to adapt a lot of that stuff, either because they are directly educating you on it, or just because you're picking it up from them as you spend time with them. So
Yeah.
I think that as people start to spend time with someone in the healthy mindset, understanding what they need to be doing with their bodies, they're going to get that education as well.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Chris, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today. And thanks for
Mm.
sharing. We've been talking about mindset. We've been talking about, the differences of exercise and movement. I think that people are going to be having some food for thought that they can chew on at home or in the gym or, wherever they are that they're exercising and moving
Yeah,
around. But I hope that a lot of people have some good takeaways from this today. I just appreciate your time. I appreciate, all of our conversations. They're always fun. And,
absolutely.
I wish you the best in moving and staying busy and exercising. Okay.
Appreciate it. It was great to chat with you as well, as always.
Thanks for listening to this episode with Chris. If you want to be involved with the podcast, there are 2 ways for you to do that. First, if you have any questions you want answered or topics you want us to talk about, then click on the Beat Pain website link in the show notes and message me. Second, if you want to continue listening to great content and guests, then I need your help to build the podcast and get those guests' attention. The bigger the podcast gets, the easier it is for me to bring on more guests. Subscribing, writing a review, and sharing this with others helps this show expand. Thanks so much for listening.